he believed that there's nothing you can do to gain salvation.
There's nothing you can do.
There's no work you could possibly do to gain salvation. But then he also believed if you do something, you can lose salvation. And if that individual say,
Well, if a person believes he can lose it, I would say there's something he doesn't understand about the gospel. And because there's something he doesn't understand about the gospel, it's always proper to have him question himself about the matter, more so than we question him, because only the Lord knows truly. But my point is, we know what the gospel says. And if that person's testimony doesn't correspond to the words of the gospel, then the only conclusion we can draw from that is that it's suspect.
You know what, even before I understood right in anything about the truth of the gospel, like Ephesians 1:13, I had enough sense of it would seem to me, if God saves you, how could you lose that? If this is a gift God gives you, he won't take it back. He won't, and he's the only one who could ever take it back. If
you got to remember, the reason people teach that is because of the failure to rightly divide.
That's it.
And there are verses that seems to suggest that you can lose it. So I mean, you know, it's not a thing unthinkable that a person could believe or think that they can lose their salvation. But the real issue is
oh, don't take the late comers. Hello, Wayne's back.
hey, Wayne.
Good morning. I mean, even everybody. You got your call.
Oh, yeah, good morning.
Hey, y'all.
But how could the people under him really have that if I don't keep the letter of the law, then my salvation is...
Yeah, the suspect. Again, all you can do is cause them, cause them to examine themselves.
I'm saying if when they look at the examine themselves and they still say, I'm saved.
Right, but I'm saying, if a person truly understands the gospel, then they can never really draw the conclusion that they're lost. They could lose it, if they understood it from the beginning. Let your conversation, whether in word or in deed, be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. If the gospel is so clear that there's nothing you can do to get it, it is equally clear there's nothing you can do to keep it. Okay. That's why it's grace from beginning to the it's grace throughout. So, I mean, I think it's a kind of a futile. You just understand 2 Corinthians 4. The God of this world is blinding the minds of them that believe not. So the real challenge for you and I is to be as equally persistent and authoritative in declaring just the opposite. That's all you can do. And at some point, people are going to listen to you because everything else that they've tried is they're going to see the futility of it. Anyone can see the futility of trying to maintain something you couldn't earn in the first place after a while. And anybody who think that they got saved, now they're going to try to walk a straight and narrow path, endure to the end. I mean, all you have to ask yourself this question: how many sins did it take to get Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden? Okay. Well, how many do you think it would take you to get kicked out of Christ? Well, I mean
going on the premise that they
if you
go
thought
right.
you could lose
Right.
it,
Yeah, it would only take one.
it would only take one. And once you're out, you got verses that tells you if you lose it, you can't get it back.
Right. In Hebrews, they tell you. Right. James is telling me that today.
Yeah. And if you lose and can't get it back, forget it. Stop trying. Go on. You're already heading that way. I mean, if that's what you believe.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. You're on that road, so go ahead.
You can't turn around. It's too, it's got your hedged in. So what they call it, a straight and narrow path.
You know, just go on.
In fact, if it was that kind of a path, it wouldn't allow you to turn around in the first place.
Right.
To go the opposite way.
There would be no room for you to go.
It would be no room for you to turn around.
Where's that at in the Bible? Where delusional salvation is at?
Hebrews 6, I think.
So once they taste of it.
No, because I was talking to my girlfriend and she always say, when she was talking the same thing about you can't be saved and
live in kind of way.
Right.
But then my point is, if you have that kind of salvation, there shouldn't be any sin going on.
right.
I mean, but if you got to keep it out, then you got a problem.
Right. And she was saying if they backslide or when they backslide, it's just twice as hard for God to forgive.
Twice as hard or
I mean,
impossible?
it's
See,
hard.
that would be the question. See, people want to count on God's grace when they fall.
Right.
But when they're in His good graces and then they're looking at you better not sin. Because they're looking at themselves at the moment and saying, I would never do that. I couldn't do that. But then they find themselves doing it. Then they want to count on that.
Yeah, my cousin we've been talking about the gospel, and he was telling some friends of his, and he said in the conversation, the woman said, well, you have to live right to be right. Then he said, well, okay, I better never catch you doing anything that you haven't been. She said, well, I'm only human. He said, no. That's what you said in the beginning. You didn't say you was human. You said that you couldn't do it.
Right.
So don't let me catch you doing anything that's not right.
That's it. Yes, next question. Okay.
Well, say it, so I can read.
What? Nothing was said.
You said a book.
No, that was giving a reply to a question up here. No questions, huh? Didn't hear anything that really challenged you and got y'all fired up this week, huh?
I heard on the news where a woman is suing a doctor. I flipped. She's suing a doctor in the hospital because the doctor she didn't tell her in time that she was pregnant so that she could kill a baby. And so she's suing the doctor in the hospital so that they can help her financially to raise the child. And I just flipped. I heard this on the news yesterday, and I just stopped in my track. She's putting what she did and trying to blame everybody else.
Genesis 3.
Yeah. That's amazing. But that was amazing.
Acts chapter 3. Acts chapter 3. And tonight we want to just kind of run down. I hadn't prepared as much, but every week lately have been keeping me from getting to Acts chapter 3, so I'm just going to go on and get into it. My days get full. And if I don't do it in the morning, I don't get to do it in the evening. So. Acts chapter 3, and we'll begin reading, and we'll come back and begin to discuss the issue. The two subject matters in Acts chapter 3 is the healing of the lame man and Peter's sermon in response to the people at their wondering at the miracle itself. Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. Now as I read that, you're reminded that you're dealing with a people who operate under a spiritual program from God that gives them specific instructions about their spiritual life and how they are to do things. And there's instruction that, in essence, cover every facet of their life. And certainly God had instructions about their prayer life. And God has given numerous instructions. I won't know the references right offhand. I'll just make reference to the point, and I'll leave it up to you to go and search it out. Search and see. Be a Berean. But God gave instructions to Israel about their prayer. Now, one of the things God did and made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and ultimately to the nation of Israel, that God determined to place His name in the earth, number one. And He determined to place His name in a particular geographical location on the planet. And that place was Jerusalem. Okay. God determined to put His name in that place. And everything that God began to do with the nation of Israel was designed to lead them to that place and the establishment of His kingdom in the earth, in the land of Palestine, and Jerusalem being the city of the great king. When God gave instructions to Israel about their prayer life, one of the things He told them that if they weren't in Jerusalem to pray in the temple, they were to pray toward that place, in the direction of that place. So they had specific instructions about their prayers and how they were to pray and when they were to pray, and like I say, toward which direction they were to pray. And they were always to pray toward Jerusalem. Wherever they were to face Jerusalem and then pray toward that city. And that was all to acknowledge what God's designs were for Jerusalem and for the nation of Israel. There's a verse back in Psalms where it says, pray to God, give God no rest. In other words, the people was to pour out their prayers to God, to offer up their prayers to God and not allow Him to rest until Jerusalem was made a praise in the earth. And because that's God's design and that's God's intent. So, but they were always to pray toward Jerusalem, toward the temple and so forth, because that's where God chose to put His name. And then they also had specific times to pray. As it says here now, Peter and John went up together into the temple, notice, at the hour of prayer. They had a set time to go and pray. Now that's in striking contrast to, if you remember 1 Timothy 2, where Paul says, I will that men pray everywhere.
Yeah.
In other words, not men everywhere pray, but men pray wherever they are.
Yeah.
And not just pray everywhere, but to pray without ceasing. So, and it has nothing to do about directions anymore. Why? Because now God dwells where? In you. See, when God placed His name in Jerusalem, He took up His dwelling place in the temple. His Shekinah glory was there. And again, all of these things was designed to acknowledge the things that God had, wanted acknowledged. Jerusalem being the place of worship. All nations one day are going to come to Jerusalem to worship God, because God is, ultimately going to again set up His presence in Jerusalem, and all people of the earth are going to go to Jerusalem to worship God. But the particular interest here is the fact that you had specific instruction about prayer. And this is when you know you're functioning and operating under a law program, because you have things that prescribe to you, tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Look back at Galatians for a moment. Galatians chapter 4. And you got to remember, see, this is something about you and I as members of the body of Christ, and what God is seeking to do in you and I. It's not that we're not given instruction, but we're not given the kinds of instructions that are designed to tell us every little bitty detail about our life, about what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we should do it, when we should do it, etc., etc., etc. That is not the mark of maturity. The mark of maturity is for you to be supplied with sufficient information for you to make those decisions. And that is exactly the position that God has placed you and I in today, is for you and I to make those decisions. He gives us the information, to give us the capacity, we give us the ability to do those things, but the choices become ours. Galatians, I tell you what, Galatians 4. Beginning at verse 1. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a what?
Child.
As long as he is a child. Now, what is it that Paul of Constance says to you and I as members of the body of Christ?